Coming up, the rookies were in camp, but more than that, have we learned who will play across the way from one Deontay Banks? Cor'Dale Flott spotlight is shining bright. We also talk about signings and are there breakout candidates across this roster that we do not expect to see this season? Let's get into it all coming up next. Yes, my friends. It's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where you know that we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Armbrecht. Over there, Andrew Mackowitz. We're healthy, we're wealthy, we're wise. We're coming off a Mother's Day weekend that everybody enjoyed. No one more than yours truly, who did not get together with Andy over the weekend for a soccer match and have to wake up at the crack of dawn the next day.
Yeah, listen, it was a foolish mistake thinking that you can enjoy yourself on Saturday night into the wee hours and then not have responsibilities as a father on Mother's Day to have to wake up super early, go get the card and the flowers and the breakfast and set everything up. Let's just say it was a struggle, but we power through it. That's what all the greats do in life, Adam, is they power through it. They find a way to make it work. Yesterday was no different for me.
We're going to talk about some guys trying to power through here in the rookie camp for the Giants and also just studs. We mentioned Cor'Dale Flott. Is he ready to take that big center stage as cornerback, number 2? Before we do, they'll let you know today's episode is brought to you by Potential, Pietential. Potential is an online assessment tool free for individual users. Nice little survey. Go ahead and set a baseline for your well-being, gives you tools to improve over time, and tracks your progress as well. Something that every single New York Football Giant should be doing, tracking your progress over time as well. Head over to Pietential.com, Potential.com. Go ahead and get your wellness in line. Now, talk about getting things in line here. We have to start with what feels like the answer to the question that we all had coming out of the draft and coming through free agency. The New York Football Giants did not go out and sign high-profile cornerback X. They didn't have a lot of money to do so. They didn't even really sign guys that we kind of thought had a baseline, had maybe performed well other places, just to give you a safety net. Instead, they go to the draft. They draft Drew Phillips. We get really excited about that. He's projected to probably start at the slot corner. So who's playing across from Deontay Banks? Well, according to Brain Daboll, Cor'Dale Flott, baby. Very excited to see how he's going to perform in camp. Where do you stand on the Giants' plan, seemingly, when it comes to the secondary and having that tandem with Banks?
Well, we talked about how the draft fell for the Giants. We thought that cornerback was an area of need. We thought that maybe they could go into the second round, going, after sleeping on round 1 and looking at how the board had fell out for the Giants in round 2, you kind of sat there and said, of the next 20 or so players that are listed on the board, there's about 6 or 7 really good cornerbacks that the Giants could target in the second round. There was a massive wave and a run on corners, so it didn't allow the Giants to actually go out and get one of those outside cornerbacks that we all expected them to. Instead, they went and drafted Tyler Nubin, safety, still another area of need, but probably the board didn't fall the way the Giants wanted. Knowing that they absolutely needed to get a cornerback in this draft, they went and then got Drew Phillips in the next round. And people said, well, maybe he has an opportunity to play outside. Maybe he's the guy that is physical enough to be able to do it, has a relative athletic score that's almost off the charts. Maybe he can handle it. You saw day 1 rookie minicamp and some of the drills and everything. He was playing, Drew Phillips was playing the nickel corner spot. They didn't even put him outside for a single rep. It pretty much tells you all you need to know that they have a vision for him on the inside. They're giving Cor'Dale Flott an opportunity on the outside. Now, Adam, I don't know. I mean, this is what you say when you're months away from the season, is we have all the confidence in the world in our player. The guy that Joe Shane drafted, the guy that we put our hand up and said we wanted. And while it seemed like he had a good rookie campaign, it felt like he regressed a little bit last season, Adam. But this is what you do. When we're talking about, what was it, May, beginning of May, like people are just getting back in the building, making sure that their passes, badges, scan them into the building. You give everybody all the confidence in the world until you realize that it's not working and you have to go either make a trade or sign a veteran free agent that's still out on the market. But obviously, the Giants are going into this thinking Cor'Dale Flott is going to get the first crack at this. And that's what I think the expectations should be for everyone, is that he's the first man up to see if he can handle the job.
Yeah, well, I mean, and why? I guess why wouldn't he be, right? He's an in-house guy. He's a guy that the Giants took in the third round, 17th pick overall. Now, whether or not so he came into the league 6 foot and a half, maybe 6'1", buck 75, incredibly lean. The one thing I remember, like last year, felt like, and we'll talk about how he progressed over the start of his career. Last year felt like a little bit of a regression, but I do remember going back to his rookie year thinking, oh, he is kind of that long, lean type of player that if you put some mass on him, they use him a little bit in a versatile way, even in his rookie season when he got on the field. So in my mind, I want to say this is actually kind of a part of the journey that the Giants intended for Cor'Dale Flott. You bring him in, but you have Adoree Jackson. So obviously, and then slowly over time, you feel like you build towards a place where yeah, he can play on the outside for us. Maybe the problem here is, Andy, if we go look at a couple of different things, I mentioned some of the measurables there. You're going to talk about where he was as a prospect coming out of college. I'll just throw in here as well. Remember the RAS scores? We like to use these to kind of reference as well. He was a 7.46 coming out. Remember, composite size grade is okay. Composite speed grade is good. The only thing that really stood out for him was height. The 20 split, which means being able to stay sharp and tight with receivers on the outside, especially coming off the line, and the shuttle speed. But it's not like anything really from a pure prospect standpoint jumped off the page to you. This was going to be about we like some of the raw talent and we think we can develop him over time. Just do you think that this is the journey? Do you think that they're like, and now the journey is complete? He's ready to start across from Deontay Banks.
Well, actually, I think this is less to do with Cor'Dale Flott than it does with new defensive coordinator Shane Bowen. I think that's the one thing that people are not realizing is, Shane Bowen takes over as defensive coordinator and he may say, oh, well, it's kind of another defensive mind. They're probably going to run the same scheme. Keep in mind that Wink Martindale was the defensive coordinator for the Giants, who blitzed more than any defensive coordinator ever, maybe ever in the NFL, right?
Right.
I mean, he's looking to just get exotic looks and throw blitzes from all over the place, which Adam usually relies heavily on man-to-man coverage on the outside, right?
No, yeah, I'm not trying to. Never met a problem he couldn't blitz. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, hey, things aren't going well. Quick, somebody blitz something. Sorry.
Third and 1, blitz. First and 15, blitz. Like that.
Yeah.
That clearly was Wink Martindale's philosophy: is just speed up the processing for quarterbacks. But not to knock on Wink Martindale because it's exciting and it creates havoc. But like quarterbacks are getting so much more cerebral and can understand things at a faster pace that maybe just blitzing and throwing the kitchen sink at him isn't always the best thing. Keep in mind, Shane Bowen is a zone-heavy 3-4 scheme guy. He's all about filling the box and stopping the run. That's his primary thing. When you think about what that means on the outside, this could play very well for Cor'Dale Flott. He is not a press corner. He is not strong enough at the point of attack at the snap to be able to jam up a guy and not let him get separation. But he is a smart, heady type player, and that's exactly what they kind of talk about when coming out of college. NFL Draft Buzz said Cor'Dale Flott, an aware zone corner who is also adept in man coverage. He has hand speed, but straight line speed to stay with receivers downfield. They kind of say that he's a heady player. He's got great awareness. He fits. The question I have is, doesn't it feel like he fits Shane Bowen's scheme better than Wink Martindale's scheme?
I think there's a lot of guys that we're going to talk about fitting better under Bowen than they did under Wink Martindale because Wink Martindale has a more singular need out of an individual player, whereas Shane Bowen is saying, to your point, especially playing a little more of a zone 3-4, hey, I don't need you to lock into player X or position X. I need you to be able to occupy space, read and react to what's happening for the offense, and then go make those plays. Yeah, so in theory, like say, a long lean has a decent wingspan, put me out in space. Don't make it about me locking up man-man coverage. Listen, Deontay Banks will handle that job if we need to come down to it. But if you want me to stay with a man to point X and then open myself up to whether or not it's going to a run play, whether or not it's going to be an underneath pass, and I need to help and support, all those things I think are where potentially Cor'Dale Flott could excel.
Yeah, and if you go back to what we talk about, what were the attributes and the skills that scouts and others talk about with someone like Cor'Dale Flott? NFL.com had it list up there that he plays with, quote unquote, good discipline in zone coverages. And then we talk about NFL Draft Buzz. It's a place you and I really like to go. They do a great breakdown. Their quote directly about Cor'Dale Flott was, a coordinated athlete with good footwork and balance, a heady cover player with above average feel and anticipation in space. It feels like they're describing the new scheme that Shane Bowen likes to run.
Right.
And that's why it feels like Cor'Dale Flott is going to get the first crack at it. You mentioned long arms, tall, athletic. Like it feels like he's going to be able to get into some of those windows that quarterbacks are going to be looking to kind of fit those balls in. And knowing that he's got such a wide range, it feels like it's a good fit. I'm excited to see Cor'Dale Flott in this spot. Obviously, in-house, he's the first person that I think about that has an opportunity. Because like I also don't know if Aaron Robinson is Kaiser Sose. Like, has anyone actually seen Aaron Robinson in person before in their life? I don't really know. So what are the other options on outside corner that are on the roster today, Adam?
Right. So if we're gonna fill it out, right, we can talk about those guys. But if we're gonna fill out the idea of why is Cor'Dale Flott getting this shot, it's funny you mentioned some of those things, those attributes about him, and coming out, we think about as a prospect, developmental cornerback with good speed and excellent length. Okay, so if you believe in him, you believe you can develop him. That's good. Projected draft round was fifth going into that draft class. Obviously, the Giants took him in the third. The other thing is his prospect grade score came out as a 5.98, average backup or special teamer. Now, you could already say that he's well outperformed that projection. The Giants are already probably somewhat justified in, hey, we took him sooner. Why? Because we believed he could be a contributor. But as you say, when you go inside this secondary and you think about what Trey Hawkins flashed, we couldn't have consistency. Late round pick, you want to continue to develop him. Aaron Robinson, we're not entirely sure. He may be more on a milk carton than he is on the field at this point of his Giants career. So when you, and we know they brought in Jalin Mills in the safety room on the back end of it. They brought in Long as well into the secondary, but none of these guys, none of these signings, none of these draft picks, nobody inside of that room after Deonte Banks, especially from a pure cornerback standpoint, do you go, oh baby. And then obviously Drew Phillips is getting the rookie buzz here in the slot. So yeah, of course, like it's wide open for him. And here's the one thing, I'm fine with it. I'm fine if you feel like you're developing this player. I can start to believe in Cor'Dale Flott as a guy that's going to be able to contribute as an outside corner. The one thing that we've learned, though, over the last couple of years, too, though, is don't get overhyped about what you see in camp, because sometimes it's relative to what the talent of the team is. We saw some of these defensive players. Trey Hawkins was like, oh my God, look what he's doing in camp. And it turned out, well, we really don't have that good of wide receivers, so it makes it easy to look better. Now, that'll be different. Now you have Malik Neighbors in the room, right? Now you even have a Theo Johnson. You have this team looking different. So certainly, hopefully, camp gives us a better indicator of where these guys are. I'm not bullish on Cor'Dale Flott right now, but I'm cautiously optimistic that this is a better scheme and a better fit for him to really start to develop in year 3.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Shane Bowen changes everything, in my opinion, on Cor'Dale Flott. I'm excited for him to get the first crack, but keep in mind, Adam, it's still May. There's a lot of time to go to figure out who's going to be starting week 1 on the opposite side of Deonte Banks.
That's the other part of it, too. Coming up here in a second, we got a little contract handed out here in rookie training camp. Let's talk about maybe finding another diamond in the rough, plus some reports on breakout candidates for the upcoming season. Should we really be getting bullish again about Daniel Bellinger? We'll get into that coming up here in just one moment. Before we do, we let you know this episode is also brought to you by Personam. Oh, Personam is an AI-driven cyber threat detection engine. Personam improves your vision into your network security environment and allows you to see cyber threats that other tools and platforms simply cannot do. Personam is always vigilant, always learning. Check out Personam today. Another guy we're going to check out is Elijah Chapman. Hey, I said, this defensive line, sure, Dexter Lawrence is absolutely elite, but I want more. I need another body in the room. I didn't know it was going to be Elijah Chapman. I didn't know it was going to be a random 278-pounder, but the Giants seem to be indicating that they feel like they may have found, and they've now shown this over the last couple of years, we can kind of go find a guy and plug him in and feel like we have a nice piece behind us. How confident or excited are we about the prospect of Elijah Chapman?
Well, I'm not going to go overboard
Oh,
on
no,
this.
he sighed. That means it's over. He's not that excited.
Well, listen, Elijah Chapman, fine player. There's still a lot for us to learn about. He's
Of
23
course.
years old, undrafted out of SMU, Adam. He was a 4-year starter at SMU. Obviously, he's got a high motor. He needs to develop a little bit more. He needs some polish and seasoning. But also, Adam, he's also a little bit smaller for the nose tackle, defensive
Yes.
tackle position. He's about 6', 275. As an example, I was very high on Casey Rogers, who was signed as an undrafted free agent. He's 6'4", 295 with a huge relative athletic score. Like he fits the mold of what I think is more likely for the Giants to be able to have backing up someone like Dexter Lawrence. I'm curious to see what this contract ends up being. I mean, is it a minimum deal with no guaranteed money, but he's guaranteed to be sticking around in camp, and they gave him a $25,000 signing bonus? Like, I don't know what the contract looks like, and so
Yeah.
because of that, I'm taking a pause on getting too excited about it. It feels like he's going to get a chance to compete. I still believe Casey Rogers has a better inside track on being able to make this roster than many people probably think about.
Of course, seems to be a little bit of buzz about him. To your point, he's not a guy that was highly regarded coming out in the draft class. It looks like, yes, he's very good in run defense, but agility, being more of a straight line guy, being a one gap guy, excuse me. I actually think about it more as maybe the versatility we talk about with Shane Bowen's system. Yeah, okay, zone 3-4, but what if you want to put an extra hand down in the dirt there across the front, right? What if you need to bring out Kayvon Thibodeau for a rep? I like the idea of, because I think what happened a lot of times last year, and kind of no matter who was on the field, a lot of times it was, oh, we need 4 yards in a run play, we'll just get 11. That, they still got beat up the middle of this team here, up in the middle of this defense. So I like the idea that if you're going to go away from the rush and away from getting pressure on the quarterback, we're talking about, run predicted kind of downs and distances, turning around and saying we just have extra bodies. Let's get as big as we can across the front, and then trust still being able to utilize a Brian Burns, still be able to have a Karake, right? Looking at the players in behind them to come up in support. And when you talk zone schemes again, the idea is the secondary can get in behind it too. So this is less about Chapman and more just about the mold of players that I think can have a little bit more value to this team. I think DJ Davidson should have a little bit more value to this team. We got excited about him last year, and then just had to let it kind of go by the wayside, right? I like the idea of these guys seeing better depth reps behind Dexter Lawrence, around Dexter Lawrence, than we did in years past. That to me is speaking to, let's make sure we're getting deeper here. Like, let's make sure that our depth can hold the tide as opposed to being so reliant on our elite number ones.
Yeah, keep in mind the Giants got Jordan Phillips
Yeah.
as one of those interior defensive linemen as well. He's 31 years old, so he's kind of that veteran presence after you lost Ashawn Robinson. You still have Nunez Roche. Jordan Riley is another name that we saw flashes of
Yeah.
in camp that's going to be there, as well as Ryder Anderson has been around this team. It feels like they're slowly building out this depth with Mitchell and Casey Rogers and all the players I just mentioned before. It's starting to feel like the interior of the offensive line has enough depth pieces that they don't need to go out and make another move if they don't want to. So
Yeah.
I like the room as a whole. It's going to be interesting to see how the pecking order ends up shaking out over the next couple months.
Yeah, that's probably one of the ones to watch is going to be, like you say, from a rep share standpoint, what are we going to be looking at? We all know Dexter Lawrence is going to be plug and play for the bulk of it, but how do you fill it out around him, especially when right now I mentioned DJ Davidson. Listen, where's he on the depth chart? Are we talking about him being up on the depth chart and getting, starting level reps at some points when you have Dexter in the middle there at the nose tackle? I don't know. We'll wait and see on all of that. Camp should be fun for that position. The other thing here is breakout candidates. Kind of just, give you a little flavor around the New York Football Giants and what's been getting talked about. I find it interesting. You go over to G-Men HQ and they say breakout candidates for the upcoming season, Andy, and we can always get behind these kind of things. Now, I have 3 offensive weapons that get listed here, and then we have one on the other side, which happens to be Cor'Dale Flott. Good. Let's go ahead and keep this buzz going. First, he gets rumored he might be getting some reps on the outside in camp. Next thing you know, he's a breakout star. That's what we're hoping on that side of the football. When we flip it, though, and I say Jalin Hyatt, I say Wan'Dale Robinson. Let's pause there for a second. They could be breakout candidates, right? Wan'Dale Robinson sniffed around it a little bit this past season. Highly productive in terms of percentage, 60 catches on 78 targets. Want to see more yards per catch, but he's right there on the fringe. And then Jalin Hyatt, you assume because we just didn't get the full taste of him, but he can take the top off of defenses, and now you have Malik Neighbors. But when I get to Daniel Bellinger being on this list, I'm torn because we here on OGP love Daniel Bellinger. But I just do not see a world where Theo Johnson was brought in without it being the idea that he is the stretching athletic tight end that the Giants want to utilize in the ish vein of a Darren Waller, whereas Daniel Bellinger is going to be more of an inline with the ability to come off of there and make plays in the passing game as well.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of an interesting piece of it. We already mentioned Cor'Dale Flott. Obviously, he's going to get the first opportunity, so that makes sense on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to leave Bellinger till last because I think it's probably the most important situation. Uh, my question back to you before we even dive into this is like,
Okay.
what what would a breakout be for Wan'Dale Robinson or Jalin Hyatt? Like, are you saying they're going to have more yards than Malik Neighbors? Are you saying they're going to get
Mhm.
7 to 10 touchdowns? Like, what is a breakout? Being the wide receiver number 2 on the Giants and getting 550 yards, is that considered a breakout? Like, I want to make sure that we're setting proper expectations here as well.
Well, it's part of it. Like Wan'Dale Robinson specifically being the second round pick, right? So mid second round pick, 43rd overall. I mean, he had 60 catches for 525 last year. That's 8.8. Now the touchdowns won each of his first 2 seasons in the league. For him, I think that the threshold is probably a little bit higher. Being a breakout star, well, I mean, he caught 60 balls. So 70 plus catches, and then maybe you expand it and you talk about being more like taking over what Darius Slayton was doing from a production standpoint. I need to see you having 850 yards this season. That might be a breakout for him. For Jalin Hyatt, even though we know he actually caught more balls than you maybe realize because there wasn't as much playing time or reps early in the season as we were all hoping for, he is more interesting to me. Like, I don't think the breakout season for Wan'Dale Robinson might not look too dissimilar this last year because I think that that was a very good season. I think that he's going to have a nice additional step forward here in the upcoming year. But Jalin Hyatt, who this past season had 23 catches on 40 targets for 373, 16.2 yards per catch. So 45 catches for him. 45 catches for him can end up converting into 700 plus yards potentially. If the idea is that it's just about reps, volume, and go, like Malik Neighbors is going to take a lot of attention away here. Go, Jalin Hyatt. And we saw him last year make some of those really impressive athletic catches on the field when he was given the opportunities. So I might look at him out of this group. I know we're going to talk about Bellinger, but I'm going to look at Jalin Hyatt and say, like, you want like real breakout ability because you got Malik Neighbors in the building now. I'll look at him and say, hey, he plays 17 games and he sees probably 70, 80 targets on the year potentially, depending on how you're structuring this offense. Yeah, like it could very easily be Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalin Hyatt. That's your three-headed monster. And Darius Slayton, if he is still here, is going to very much fall by the wayside because these are more dynamic playmakers and they're the draft picks of this regime.
Yeah, so that was a really good way to frame it, Adam. Because my challenge is, I'm extremely confident that barring injury, Malik Neighbors is going to lead the team in receiving yards,
Oh,
right?
of course,
Like, and his over under is 840, which is a
which is
number
low.
that we both
Take the
believe is
over.
going to be higher. We think he can get to 1,000 yards.
We
But
smashed
like,
it.
if he's going to be leading the team, and you look at Wan'Dale Robinson being number 2 in yards or maybe receptions or whatever it is, is 725 yards a breakout season for Wan'Dale Robinson? Like,
Right.
I like if he increases by 15-20% in terms of like 10 more catches, 200 more yards,
Yeah.
that's what we call a breakout. To me, it doesn't seem like there's as much upside if we're saying he's not going to be a 1,200-yard receiver, right? And
Right.
so, to your point, Jalin Hyatt felt like he couldn't get on the field all that much, has an opportunity. He only had 23 catches. If he gets 43, 53 catches, like, you're talking about a significant spike, especially with his yards per catch. Like, he's getting
Yeah.
16.2. Like, he could fill it up very, very quickly. So I just wanted to stress, like, I think Hyatt has a better upside, but he still has to get on the field. Like, keep in mind, Darius Slayton is still on this roster, and
Yep.
like thinking about where the path is for Jalin Hyatt to break out is a little bit more challenging.
You know,
Now, when we turn over to, wait, did you have one more thing on?
well, just really interestingly, how about this? That because Wan'Dale Robinson, remember, missed the first 2 games of the season as well because he was still coming back from his injury. When you go back and look, 641 snaps for Wan'Dale Robinson last season, 557 for Jalin Hyatt. He was on the field a lot. Like, interestingly enough, and it really increased as you got down the stretch, right? He only played 36, 21, 32 over the first 3 weeks of the season, had lulls in the middle of the year, but he had some pretty big spikes. So I mean, he was inconsistent. There was a lot of game to game because you can get all the way to week 10, only plays 17 snaps, right? Plays 29 the next week, but then gets 36, 44, 57 in week 17 of the season as well. So it's interesting how his ended up being broken down. Meanwhile, just to your point, 896 for Darius Slayton. So on the one hand, it's listen, Darius Slayton, whatever you think or don't think he is, he's been consistent. He's been there. He's been available. That matters. Now, though, if you want one of these guys to break out, or maybe you want both of them to take a next step forward, there is a lot of reps that Darius Slayton was occupying. And I do wonder how Kafka and Daboll are going to look at the offensive system now with Malik Neighbors and say, well, Malik Neighbors is the new number one. He's the guy that's going to be up over 900 snaps this year. How do we fill that out when we look at these other players? So that's a big part of that we're going to watch going forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I want to switch over to Bellinger because when you talk about snaps, it feels like there is an opportunity for him to get more snaps. Like it makes sense for Bellinger to be potentially someone on this list just because if Darren Waller decides to retire, which it sounds like most indications are saying that he's leaning towards retiring, if he is no longer there, he is the third-year tight end that has the most experience on the roster, that knows the scheme, has been in it for a couple of years, that can perform. But we love Daniel Bellinger, and we want him to get an opportunity. We think he's going to be in a lot of pass blocking situations, play action situations. I could see that happening quite a bit. But the Giants did go out and get Theo Johnson, who is an athletic freak of nature, right? Like if anyone's seen any of the pictures from the draft class and like him standing on the field, he is noticeably larger than a lot of other NFL football players. It's not just like him standing next to a short coach. Like he's
big for humans.
Significantly bigger than Tyrone Tracy, significantly bigger than Tyler Nubin. Like he just is a mammoth of a man who is a freak athlete. And like when you have that much untapped potential and you think about what the Giants went out and traded a third-round pick for Darren Waller, wanting to get more explosive, big-time plays down the field. If he retires, it feels like that is the role that they're looking for Theo Johnson to play more than they would say, Daniel Bellinger, we want you to change from a really good in-the-trenches run-blocking guy that can catch passes and be unique to like, let's stretch the field, let's stretch the seam vertically with Daniel Bellinger down the middle. Doesn't necessarily see the best utilization of his skill set.
And I'll go back to the snap count numbers. 1,375 snaps for the tight end room collectively. Now, that, of course, is going to break down with a large bulk going to those top two guys we talk about, Bellinger and Waller. Bellinger had the most reps at tight end out of anybody, 688. Injuries, obviously, for Darren Waller, 568. 101 to Lawrence Cager, who was basically your spot fill, and the Giants brought him back in when you needed the athletic tight end. He's not the same model as Darren Waller, but that was the idea. Pass catcher first, guy you can spread out in the scheme at times. He ended up getting those reps. So to your point, the baseline for Daniel Bellinger is still going to be upwards of 700, maybe even more than that. But then when you think about filling in the gaps here, this is what I think is interesting. If we assume that Darren Waller retires, I think that's part of the reason why you brought back a guy like Lawrence Cager, because you still want to have a pass catcher in the room. And now it's just about Theo Johnson. How quickly does he develop? How quickly does he understand the scheme? And how quickly do you feel like you can integrate him into it? The best version of this is to have Daniel Bellinger in line and to have Theo Johnson be able to spread out and move around the formation a little bit. If you can accomplish that, then all of a sudden you're just Waller gone, young Theo Johnson in, but then the versatility becomes, Daniel Bellinger, kind of your point. Hey, you're now the elder statesman, and you need to be the guy that's reliable and consistent, works those, as we saw in his rookie year, little quick out routes that get out and up, get yourself to the end of the pylon near the end zone and give those opportunities. So I find it interesting to see how it works itself out. From a breakout candidate standpoint, it's hard because they don't often give breakout candidate status to a player that gets a lot better at blocking and all of a sudden does a really good job setting the edge for the run game. That's typically not where the awards go, and I actually think that's going to be critical and something that I hope Daniel Bellinger can excel at. The quick little caveat here is, remember, they brought in other kind of blocking tight ends this offseason, so I do wonder fundamentally, how do you view Daniel Bellinger? Are you trying to get him to be an all-phase tight end, or are you comfortable with him just being the weapon? It would seem like you want both because you got Theo Johnson.
And Adam, at the end of the day, the New York Giants offense only scored 15.6 points per game last year. They were 30th in the league. So, like, if you're looking at which side of the ball has more room for improvement or opportunities to break out, it probably would be the offense. Keep in mind, Daniel Jones only played a third of the game, so you didn't have your starting quarterback. Keep in mind that the offensive line was kind of a little bit makeshift, and Andrew Thomas was out for a good portion of that. Saquon Barkley was out. The offense just really could not get going. And the last thing I'll say is there's not that many other guys that you can have as breakout candidates because there's only 11 guys on the field on offense. It's like If you said Malik Neighbors was going to be a breakout, you'd be like, oh, the top 6 NFL electric wide receiver is going to be a breakout candidate. Great.
Right.
Like it doesn't feel like there were many other avenues to be able to go, but the Giants offense needs to get better. It should be better. If the Giants aren't getting at least into middle of the road territory, which 16th in the league was 21.5 points per game. We're saying, can the Giants put 6 more points up per game? They're going to need all the help from Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalin Hyatt, Daniel Bellinger, and Malik Neighbors in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, listen, we'll talk about it in the offseason. We get towards the regular season. Hey, who are our breakout candidates? Well, I don't know. Keep an eye on Tyrone Tracy, right? I don't know. What's Eric Gray going to be? What's Singletary going to be? There's certainly some conversations about that running back room that I think are exciting and fun behind the veterans. So we'll continue to have those talks as we work our way through the offseason. We do have coming up on Wednesday night schedule. The schedule is going to break out. So between now and then, Wednesday morning, we'll be ahead of it. Maybe we'll do a live at night as it breaks out, but we're going to highlight why the Giants are the team that's going to be over in Munich playing in Germany this year. Some of the other big opening ones here that Art Stapleton already talked about today on Twitter. So we'll break all those down Wednesday morning, talk a little bit of schedule, give our ideal versions of how you want things to go, because we already know the opponents. It's just about when they line up and how many times we get thrown onto a Thursday night game. You know the Giants are primed for the spotlight. We'll see about all that. Make sure you get us on YouTube, over on Twitter at AMAC214, at Adam Armbrecht, and at One Giant Podcast. Schedules, baby, on Wednesday. Until next time, it's Andrew Mackowitz with Want, Need, and A. Demand that people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.